Hello again, Michael Ware with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. We've got Ben Gillenwater from the familyitguy.com. And I think that you go by several different monikers, the family IT guy, whatever else, family IT guy here and there. I first ran across Ben on Instagram, and I'm not sure why his stuff popped up in front of me, exactly sure why, but I'm glad it did. And I've been watching ever since. So would you like to do an introduction of yourself and we'll get rolling here?
Sure thing. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Michael. Yeah, my name is Ben. I'm the family IT guy. I'm a dad and I'm a cybersecurity expert with 30 years of experience. I've been doing this tech stuff since 1995.
Well, eventually you'll get good at it, Ben.
I'm still trying. It's hard. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I first thought that this would be good because the Second Amendment crowd tends to be the type that are very reserved on handing out their information. They don't like the idea of being on a list. And if they are on a list, they want to be as on as few as humanly possible. So initially, I reached out to you wanting to see if you could walk us through best practices for those kinds of things. But it does occur to me that most all of us have children or have nieces, nephews, young loved ones, whatever it may be. So I would like to chase those rabbits into what we should be doing as parents or whatever else too, because in full disclosure, I've got a 16-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old boy, and I have grave concerns about what's being thrust in front of them and what's being gathered. So I'd like to take a dive across the board on those things if you're willing to walk through that.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And I think that's where we all could use help in that way. I mean, this is very, very complicated, very difficult stuff that is brand new to humans. You know, we this since 2007 when the iPhone came out and with along with Android and followed by the App Store and all the social media programs, there's a new category of parenting. Now you have to be a tech expert in order to be a parent, and most people are not, and that's why I do what I do. I've here to share my experience and some of my own struggles where I've messed up too. Because one of the things that got me into focusing on this family IT guy thing, because my background was in defense and intelligence, and I was the chief technologist for a big defense contractor. They had a $10 billion a year IT business, and I was the most senior technical person in their IT business. And I've worked with the NSA, and I've been around a lot of high security environments. And so, but now, whereas before I would focus on sort of, national security type stuff. Now I focus on family security, because when it boils down to it, and you have your iPhone here sitting in your kid's pocket, dealing with that situation is sometimes harder than it is to deal with operating a data center for an intelligence agency. There's complexities here that are hard to grapple with. But there are things that can be done, and there are solutions to be had, and there's some stuff that's actually not that complicated after all, that really knocks out a bunch of it. So we'll go through that today.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to start at the top with relatability, at an attempt at relatability and to share my own failings. And so my kid is 10 right now. My son is 10. And when he was 5, I gave him an iPad. I voluntarily, on my own accord, gave him an iPad. And I voluntarily, on my own accord, installed YouTube on that iPad and gave him access to YouTube. Looking back at that, kind of a not very smart decision. Took me a couple of days to figure out that that was not a smart decision, and that in fact that was very risky and very dangerous for his mind because of the I mean, speaking of rabbit holes, kids get sent down some pretty intense and scary and sexual and disturbing rabbit holes, especially on systems like YouTube. And so I took YouTube off the iPad. It's like, okay, that was a mistake. That, like I say, it took me a couple of days. And then I installed YouTube Kids on the iPad because it's called Kids. And at the time, the gal that was running the YouTube business was a grandma, the CEO of YouTube. And so, okay, well, there's a product that's brought to market by a grandma that is called Kids. And it's got parental controls. And when you go in, you tell it the age of your kids. And then, so therefore, it's going to have appropriate stuff. Well, it doesn't. And through all of my years of running R&D labs and finding out that tech companies, the brochure doesn't always match the product.
Yeah.
I found out that, of course, that's the case for kids too. And I think I was very naive in thinking that if products are built for kids, that they're taking an extra step of care to say, well, our default mode as humans is to protect kids for most of us. And I thought that would follow through to software. But as it turns out, business incentives override even looking after kids, to the extent that the product that's called YouTube Kids showed my son content that was so scary that he had nightmares for years. Like it was like 2 or 3 years. He was exposed to superheroes having sex with each other. Spider-Man costume and a princess costume doing sexual things together. Nowadays, with the AI stuff, it's even way deeper and darker. So I took YouTube Kids off as well. I was like, well, that didn't work. The parental controls are not effective. And come to find out, the iPad itself was just so addictive and such a beautifully designed, attractive device that I had to take the whole iPad away. It was disrupting his sleep. He would wake up and go to the iPad instead of getting ready for school. He would try to go to bed later so he could play with the iPad. Really, the biggest one is he's got a friend that lives here in the neighborhood that he hangs out with most every day. And, come home from school. It's classic, like in the movies. Drop the backpack, go outside, play with your friends. Mm-hmm. Well, so he would come home from school and drop the backpack and then go to the iPad.
Yep.
And that to me inherently is like, okay, that's a problem. So we took away the whole iPad. And it's unfortunate because the iPad had FaceTime and it had Google Meet, and that's how he would communicate with some of his family and have video calls and have a beautiful connection with his family members that had to be removed. And so now he has an Apple Watch and it's fully restricted and it has a cell phone built into it. So he goes and rides as far as he wants to ride on his bike. And then if he falls on the bike, he calls us and we can come help him. And so, I made some significant mistakes as a technology expert in taking these things for granted. And I think it's worth starting off at the top of the show here with that as a theme, as nothing can be taken for granted when it comes to matching up technology, especially internet connected technology, with children. Nothing can be taken for granted. Everything must be scrutinized and carefully examined.
Well, okay. I've had a series of conversations over the last several weeks with guests that have been relatively heavy. And as you're saying these things, I'm applying my own experiences, and I'm like, we fought like cats and dogs over my daughter wanting social media on her phone.
Yes.
And I'm like, listen, I don't want to do this. I know that you want it. I know all your friends do it. I know that you sit there at school and they're all sitting around the table or in a close proximity to one another, talking to each other through these apps, even though they're literally arm's length away. And you are I know this is the week she goes to a small school. I know, Caitlin. I said, I know that you're the only one that that doesn't have this. And oh, by the way, I think that the net increase in good things in your life is going to be far outweighed by the net decrease And I'm really, so at the end of the day, it's going to be worse for you with this than you being without it. We ended up
Yes.
with a little bit of, you may tell me that I'm wrong, and I need to know this, by the way. But we ended up with a kind of uh, bargain struck. No social media. You can use Snapchat. And oh, by the way, if you use it very much throughout the day, I'll reach in there and shut it off. So I want her to stay at 30 minutes or max. And I somehow told myself that was okay. Now, I suppose this is the part in the conversation where you reach through and smack me. And before we move forward, I know what you're talking about, YouTube. My son was watching it. I walked in on him watching it one day, and it was horrific. I mean, whatever these, I think it was Poppy Playtime or something, whatever awful thing. Anyway, these
Oh
guys
yeah,
were,
those are
it was
terrible.
like, yeah. And I'm like, dude, this is the kind of thing that would give me a nightmare. I can't watch horror films because I'm messed up. I don't get any sleep for a while, you know. I looked at my son, I'm
Yeah.
like, you like this? Do you think this is okay? And he's like, yeah, I like it, Dad. I'm like, well, I don't, and you can't watch it anymore. So no more YouTube unless I'm in the room with you. You know, if I'm reading or whatever else, fine. I'll be there and look and see. And I relaxed that policy a little bit, and literally been in like the last 2 weeks. And he was watching. I don't remember what program it was, and there were two. I'm sure they probably are adults. I don't know, but they appear to be adolescent kids. And the next thing you know, one of them broke in on the room in the other one, and he's smoking something, and then he puts it away, and they laugh about it, and off they go. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, son, do you see what he was doing? Yeah. And I said, what? He's smoking or had something in his mouth. I said, do you think that that's okay? Well, no. I said, do you think it was okay for them to do that? No. And I said, well, then why am I letting you watch something where that's made okay? And then they make light of it and they sneak it. And then they move about their business. All of these things are
Yeah.
wrong fundamentally. And so I'm like, okay, Michael, you win the bad parent award today, but you don't have to duplicate this tomorrow. So I've been thinking about those things over and over and over before this interview. So go ahead, man. Start tearing me to shreds. Go ahead.
Well, no, I think you're doing a great job. And everything is relative. There's an enormous amount of nuance here, as there is in many topics. This is the struggle that everybody is dealing with. This is the current day struggle that billions of families are dealing with right now. And it's what decisions do I make? What lines do I draw? How hard of a line do I draw? Where is the gray area? Is there any gray area? There is no easy answer, but I can tell you what the fundamentals are. And I think from the sounds of it, you have a good grasp on the fundamentals, because really what it comes down to is like there's a place in our gut where we all know and feel something that tells us that this over here is right and this over here is not right, or this over here is risky and this over here is not risky. I think that especially when your kids are older, like your daughter is 16, you said, right?
Yeah.
Classic example, right? I mean, she could potentially be living on her own in a couple of years. And what skills has she developed that prepare her for that? And is she going to get dropped in the deep end on the day that she moves out, or is she going to have some experience to lean on? And I'll say, I think the most important thing, in my opinion, is the behaviors that we model as parents. And what relationship do we have with technology for ourselves? And what boundaries do we draw for ourselves, in addition to the boundaries that we draw for our kids? Because that's education, right? It's hey guys, we value safety, we value health, we value education, we value friendship. Whatever your family values or your personal values are, a value is only worthwhile if it's defended. And the way that you defend a value is by drawing boundaries, which is exactly what you're doing. And you're having the conversations. So I think that's key. And so how do we demonstrate those values and the decisions that we make with our kids and the boundaries that we draw for them and the decisions that we make for ourselves and the boundaries that we draw for ourselves that our kids watch us do? And do we take our phone into the bedroom at night? Do we have our phone in between physically? You know, the classic, right? If you and I are having a conversation and then my eyes go here and then my eyes go here and then my eyes go here and my eyes go here. You're sitting there like, hey man, are we talking to each other or not? And here, but nonetheless, here's this thing that sits between us. Do our kids experience that? And of course they do, because it happens all the time, right? It's part of the way that things are now. And it's hard sometimes to recognize when it occurs, or maybe it occurs unintentionally. You're standing in the kitchen reading an email or checking an Instagram post, and then your son walks in the kitchen, and now all of a sudden the device is between the two of you, right? So it's very difficult. But I think the fundamental number one thing is, what relationship do we have with technology? And then as we develop and assess that relationship, how do we talk about that with our kids, or do we talk about it with them? Because I think that's a great opportunity. You know, hey, hey kids, you know what? I just found out because of my screen time settings on my phone that I spent X amount of time on Instagram last week. And I've realized that that's not good for me. And so I'm going to try to reduce that from 3 hours to 2 hours, you know. And then next week, if you succeed or you fail, regardless, because it's important to teach failure. I think failure is the best teacher. Okay, next week comes around. Hey, look how I did. Actually, I got 2.5. I didn't get all the way to 2, but I'm going to try again next week and let's see how we go. That right there, I think, is a massive part of it. And so I'll pause there for a moment, but that's my first thought.
So you're saying that I should be willing to share with my children, my failings, my bad behavior, the things that I'm calling into question. And then I should not only chart for them, but share with them incremental improvement.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of positive opportunity that lies within that.
Well, I think that you're probably right. I know that you're right. I approach these things as best I can from a biblical worldview. That's the way that that's the lens that I want to use to interpret these things, right? And so when I see it like that, I've got to say, okay, well, the first thing I need to do is admit that I'm sorry, then seek forgiveness. And that's got to be very public. You know, so if I'm doing this wrong, my kids need to see dad recognizes dad didn't do this well. And you need to, you know, here's a fresh, warm crow pie. Take a bite, you know, and, you know, I love the taste of crow. But, yeah, but there's plenty for everybody, by the way. And then you move forward. So if I can't show them myself that I'm willing to admit that I need to step back, take a look and evaluate, put a plan in place to arrive at a different location. And oh, by the way, showing the progress as we go along is not inappropriate. It teaches them, I have no doubt, to do those things and do those well. And oh, by the way, it seems to be the case in every family. And I would say that this is true across parents, but it certainly, I think, is poignant for men. If dad doesn't make it a priority, then nobody else seems to care. So if there's a dad present, and not all families have a dad present, and there's a handful out there that don't have a mom present. But the reality is, if mom and dad are present, and if dad doesn't make it a priority, nobody else is going to. So especially, so if the parents don't care, you can't expect anybody else to get online. So I'm right there with you on that.
Yeah, man, I think that's great. And I think, to tie it back into firearms, if I go to the range and if I've been teaching my kid about firearms and maybe we go shooting together, I go to the range one day and I have an accidental discharge. It's a cool opportunity to come back and be like, I had an accidental discharge. Here's what happened. Maybe he's there to witness it, even better. But I think there's the conversations around this stuff could be really impactful. I think that really lodges something in the mind of it's okay to admit mistakes, and then you can learn from those mistakes, and that, dad makes mistakes. And then when I go make a mistake, maybe I default less to shame as a result, and maybe I default to, okay, well, what am I going to do about it?
Well,
So yeah,
you're moving away from moving away from anything or everything else towards truth being paramount in what you do.
yeah,
The truth winning out over everything else, and we must do that because it's easy for me to walk in the room and, and catch a glimpse of YouTube, knowing that my son has no permission to use it, and for me to say, "Hey, what was that?" and then for him immediately to say, "Nothing." Okay, that's
right.
immediately a lie, and he knows it. So now it's slowly but surely he's coming around, and then he'll tell you the truth. Okay, Dad, that was YouTube. Okay, well, thank you for telling the truth. By the way, that's important. And what were you
Yeah,
watching? And then the next lie comes, and I'm like, okay, well, you realize Dad can go back through and look at the history, and I can see what you watched. And oh, by the way, even if you find a way to get rid of that, the thing that will always betray you, my boy, is this ridiculous algorithm. And so it's going to put more and more of that crap in front of you that you've been watching. So even if you find a way to erase it all, I'll be able to go in there and fire it up. And I'm going to see examples of the kinds of things that you have been watching, whether it's the thing or not, doesn't matter. So I'm going to know
yeah.
or eventually find out, or I'll find a guy who can find out. So you might as well tell me the truth. And oh, by the way, this
Yeah,
will go well for you if you tell the truth. You and I can work it out. We'll figure
yeah,
something out. I may not come down on you very hard, but you got to tell me the
yeah.
truth.
And that it's normal to get caught up in these things because the algorithms that we're all exposed to all the time in and I'll say actually to define what is an algorithm, because it's kind of a technical term. In this context, an algorithm is anything with what I like to call a bottomless feed. So if you scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and it keeps going, it never stops. That's how you know that you're dealing with an algorithm.
Mhm.
And these algorithms are designed with the world's best addiction experts. Literally, side by side, psychologists and software engineers work together to create these systems. So there are psychologists employed by Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, and Oculus. And then there are psychologists employed by Google and TikTok and all these things because their business model requires maximum eyeball time because they are all advertising companies. Facebook is not a social media company. Facebook is an advertising company. They sell advertising at 97-ish% of their revenue comes from selling ads.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they are an advertising company that they use a social media system in order to facilitate the sale of those ads. And they addict you so that you look more, so that you see more ads. Because what they actually specifically sell are what's called ad impressions. That means when you scroll through the feed on Instagram and an ad goes by, that's an impression. So that's actually what they sell to advertisers. And then the advertisers will pay to get impressions. And then if your eyeballs land on their brand enough, maybe eventually you'll click and you'll buy something. So same for Google, same for TikTok, same for ChatGPT. Advertising companies that use technology to facilitate their advertising business. And this is something that I think many adults may not be aware of, and kids probably are far from aware of it. And that's an opportunity too of like, hey, by the way, did you know? And for the companies that are doing this stuff, the ones that are publicly traded, like Google and Facebook, or well, actually, so Google's called Alphabet, and then Facebook's parent company is Meta. If you look at their SEC reports, which are publicly available, it'll show you a breakdown of their major revenue sources. And Google's or Alphabet's is like, I think it's 76% is from selling ads. And they sell a lot of stuff, right? They sell phones, they sell Google services to companies like email and file store. They have huge lines of business that are dwarfed by their advertising business. And so that, and for the older kids, like for your daughter, that could be a fascinating experiment in, you want to see under the covers of how the world works? Look at the SEC report and actually find out what these guys are actually doing. And if they're doing that, why are they giving you a bunch of stuff that seems like it's free? What are you actually trading? Are you trading your attention? Because that's actually the currency that gets it's time and attention.
Mm-hmm.
Can you get more? So you can get more money, right? If you're lucky. You can't get more time and attention. These are innate currencies that they only go away. And so how intentional are we with our currencies of time and attention? And are we giving them intentionally? Are they being taken, perhaps unintentionally? Are we aware of the trade? Now, because if you're aware of the trade, especially as an adult, by all means, make the trades however you see fit, right? That's part of being an adult. But are you aware? And if you're a kid, that trade, us parents might want to be involved in the trade. What's being taken, what's being given.
What is that they say, Ben, if no matter where you're in the digital realm anyway, no matter where you find yourself, if you don't think that somebody's trying to sell you something, you're the actual commodity, something like that.
That's right. Yeah. So yes, in these environments, when a piece of technology is free, you are not the customer. You are the product. The customer is the person that buys the ads, the companies that buy ads. The reason that you're the product is because you're the thing that's being traded. Your time and attention are being traded in the middle of that transaction. This is why these companies are so big, is because digital ads can follow you and therefore make you a more targetable. And so if you use an Android phone that's made by Google, that is a surveillance device. And that phone follows your location and it looks at what you do and what you say. And it feeds into the advertising engine so that an advertiser that says, I want to place an ad that gets seen by a guy that has all the attributes that Michael has. He lives over here. He works over here. He shops over there. He hangs out with these people. He has these 5 hobbies. He doesn't like these things, but he does like those things. He has a certain estimated amount of income based on what we can see from following him around. And so if I have an ad that is suitable to Michael, I've got like an ad for some sweet new optic that comes out, right? I want to show it to a guy just like Michael. Well, I'm not going to just go show it to everybody and waste my money on somebody that doesn't need an optic. I want to show it to folks that do. And so it's from a business perspective, it's brilliant and very efficient. The trouble is, and on its own, it may not be that bad. The trouble is that it's not on its own. And Edward Snowden actually showed that to us when he released all those files from the NSA about what they were doing. And so what happens is you have these companies that collect all this data in order to maximize their advertising business. Anytime you collect a bunch of data on people and you keep it in a place, it's valuable. That's why it's collected. and it can be valuable for more than one thing. And if we look at some of the stuff that transpired during COVID and the way that people were having their opinions suppressed and their ability to communicate on what used to be public platforms taken away if they had the wrong opinions, or even some people got their bank accounts taken away for having the wrong opinions. The thing that facilitates those actions is the centralized collection of all the information about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever you centralize data collection, you put yourself at risk. And these are, unfortunately, the advertising data doesn't just get used by advertisers. And so, for that reason, I think it's worth being aware of the reality and cognizant of how we think about personal privacy. Because I think what might resonate well with perhaps you and the rest of your audience is that you can't have freedom without privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Privacy enables freedom. And as we teach our kids how to navigate the internet, one of the things that we can teach them is that the internet is public. The internet is permanent. If you type a word into a keyboard that's internet connected, you consider that word to be public. If you upload a photo or a video or share your location, that is public and permanent, which means it's not private. And if you are foregoing privacy in trade for a search engine or an email account or a chatbot, what does that mean for your long-term potential for freedom?
The outlook is bleak when you think about it like that. I mean, I've got some really great neighbors, and they bought a drone, and they were flying it around. And I heard it and I saw it. I mean, I live out here in the boonies, right in the country, and so these folks live not too far away. And I saw it and I heard it because I was outside on the patio, and the wind wasn't blowing, so it was easy to hear, right? So I saw it, whatever else, and I saw it was. I knew that it had made its way over my property, but there's a field and some other stuff in between, right? So anyway, it made its way back, and so I sent the neighbors and I are on a group chat or text string with my wife. So the neighbor and his wife, my wife and I'm like, hey, I said, did you get a new toy? And they're like, yeah, this thing's so great. Sorry, we meandered a little too far. And I'm like, I don't mind if you fly over and take videos or picture of the little creek out back or the walnut grove, my pond, all these other things. I don't mind. I said, but do me the favor of letting me know first and me affirming back that that's all right. I said, I won't care. And I said, but I do need to tell you this. I said, if you don't do that, I said, I have every intention of shooting it down. I said, I don't care whose it is. I said, if it flies, I said, I do. I'm looking forward on sheer principle to be the first guy on my block to down a drone. So, I mean, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to that the most, man. Other things I'm looking forward to too, but Ben, that's right up there at the top of my bucket list, downing a drone over my property. So anyway, I'm like, please don't do that. So, we make jokes about those things and we say those things, but it's legit. I mean, I came to you initially about the Second Amendment community. I mean, we understand, most of us anyway, understand what privacy is, and we want to keep that. And we also respect that, because I don't want to take something from somebody else that I had not to have, or something I had not to see. I mean, the Second Amendment community knows all too well what it's like to have somebody covet something from them that they really can't do anything with. Like I've told a lot of other people this, Ben, the Second Amendment, the anti-gunners, the anti-Second Amendment crowd, they're not coming to take my money. They're not trying to take my house. They're not trying to take my kids. They're not trying to take things from me that are tangible or that they can use. They want to take something from me that bothers them, and they don't want me to have it in terms of the use of the Second Amendment, this civil liberty. Yeah. They wish for me not to have it, so they'll sleep better knowing they've removed it from me. And that's a really serious level of cruel. I think that you've got to have a really demented idea of what reality is and had not to be in order to think like that. So I think that Second Amendment advocates understand what privacy is, and they want it for themselves, but they also want to respect it in others. And there's a whole bunch of people out there that don't see it that way. So it's an easy concept for us to grab hold of, and other people depart from it, or either that or they never had it to begin with. They're like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, then why can't I fly over your property and whatever else? I'm like, well, it's not about whether I want you, or I'm doing something wrong or not. Did it ever occur to you that I have things that I simply don't wish to share with you? And oh, by the way, that ought to be enough.
Right. It's a common courtesy at the very least. And I think there's a lot there. You know, I think that something I think about a lot is, you know, who is responsible for keeping me safe? Who is responsible for keeping my wife safe? Who's responsible for keeping my kids safe? And to what end? Why do we want to be safe? So that we can be free, you know. And there is something that's very easy to take for granted, I think, which is that others will keep you safe and your wife safe and your kids safe, and are going to expend their resources on you with nothing in return. I think that's a false premise. And so I think that one of the reasons why I sort of started by saying that I think it's on us to demonstrate the behaviors that we want to model and to lead the way, A, because it's true, and B, because nobody else is incentivized to do it, nor will anybody else do it. And if a stranger tells you they're expending their resources on your security, they are lying to you. That is a false premise. That is not a true thing. Yeah. And, you know, when it comes to being afraid of the ability to defend yourself, even in a lethal capacity, if required, implies that somebody else will. Mm-hmm. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that self-responsibility is true and is the actual long-term sustainable answer to happiness derived from freedom.
Okay.
I'm preaching to the choir here, but you know.
No, I agree with all that. I mean, you're right to illustrate that. If you're going to no longer take steps with your own safety, or the people that you're responsible for, loved ones, whatever else, then what you're saying is either they're not going to be safe at all, or if you turn that over to a third party, then they'll determine what constitutes safety or doesn't. Also, they will, let me think through this right. They will come to your aid on their terms and their terms only. And none of that sounds good to me.
No. And we see it play out, you know, those terrible floods in North Carolina, you know, where FEMA went out and chose who they would help based on what political sign they had in their yard.
Yeah.
You know, that's not safety. That's not security.
No.
You know, or you've got the Patriot Act that, from what I understand, less than 1% of the court orders and the subpoenas that have come from the Patriot Act have been about terrorism. The rest of it has been used to follow journalists, to spy on private citizens that have been accused of no crime, to restrict our movements. You can't go through the airport without getting fondled by a federal agent. Yep. Who will also lie to you and tell you that you're supposed to scan your face, even though you don't have to. You've got, you know, I think it really what it comes down to is if you fall for the trap of letting somebody else say that they're taking responsibility for your security and the security of your family, and when that somebody else is actually not a person but a system, when you pass your security over to a regulatory system that is administered by a group of people at the moment that might wear a certain color tie or a certain color pin, but nonetheless is a regulatory system. That system, once you give some security, it cannot be taken back, and it can only be expanded. And so, because if any of the administrators of that system, if any of the politicians turn off a security mechanism that they had gotten from you, and then something bad happens, they don't get reelected. And that's their primary metric for success, is whether or not they get reelected.
Yeah.
And so if you give an inch, it will become a mile, and 10 miles and 100 miles, as we've seen over and over and over again. And this is where, we have these age verification laws that are getting passed all over the place. There's like, is it 12 or 22 states in the US that are passing laws that require showing your government ID in order to access certain parts of the internet. And not only does it not solve the problem at all, but it's a dystopian nightmare that gives more security access over to a regulatory system. When you give a regulatory system information about yourself, the only thing it knows how to do is regulate you with that information. And so it's very easy to take for granted that many of us that are alive right now have grown up in environments where we didn't have to fight for or earn our privacy. And so we're just happy to just give it away.
I know.
And so I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, because I think it's important to introduce alternative modes of thinking to people, for those that may have not considered the fact that showing your government ID to access porn or to access social media should not be taken for granted as a good thing, and in fact is probably a bad thing.
Long term, I could see. I mean, yeah, I say this a little tongue in cheek, but I don't consider myself, and I don't think anybody else that knows me would consider me to be the conspiracy theorist type. Yes, I will get out the tinfoil and make myself a hat and dance around in front of my family or friends just to do it right. But I don't think I'd actually wear it on sheer principle. Okay. But that being said, every now and then I'm talking with somebody that's hugely influential in this sect of politics or around this thing, and my phone will just stop. I won't have an explanation as to why. It hasn't done that in the previous 90 days of use. And then, oh, by the way, I'm on the phone with the same person talking about the same thing, and my phone just stops again. And it does this often enough that it gives me a moment of pause. And I'm like, will I find out in 15 years that there were things put in place that deliberately malfunctioned or broke my communication based on who I was and what I was talking about? And I'll mutter things like that sitting there reading at night or whatever else. My wife will be like, you can't possibly believe that. I'm like, well, I don't want to believe that. And I'm not saying that I do. What I'm saying is, if I found out in the future that happened to be true, I would find no surprise in that whatsoever. She's like, and then she'll follow up. She'll be like, you really believe that? I'm like, I believe that if I found out that it would be no coincidence, yes. And oh, by the way, there are a lot of people over the last 20-so-ish years that would be considered conspiracy theorists at the time that end up saying, I told you, and they were right. And so when it comes to tech, I two things. I don't know what I don't know. And I don't think that there's any way that I'll be surprised in the future about a retrospect. I think that there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on around us that we wouldn't say yes to, Ben. And you're in a position, you probably know some of that. I mean, I get the impression that if I disliked my kid enough, I'd put TikTok in front of him and say, hey, have a ball and walk off. So I get the sense that some of these platforms are worse than others. So why don't you scare us a little bit about what we should know about these things?
Unfortunately, I can do that. And I certainly wish that I couldn't. But I do have some very unfortunate truths that are worth being aware of. And by the way, later after this, we should talk about. I've got some specific advice on how to communicate privately on the internet. We should talk about that
Okay.
too.
Okay.
Okay, so what it comes down to is there's a million things to know when it comes to kids and the internet. There's just an endless number of things to know. But there's two things that if you focus on these two things, you can knock out a majority of the problem or the problems. Those two things are addictive algorithms, which we've talked a little bit about, and I'll talk a little bit more, and online chat. Those two things right there, from everything that I've been focusing on this family IT guy thing for a couple of years now, full time. And in fact, I stopped all my other work. I shut down some of my companies. I left. I'm a co-founder in a gym franchise. I stepped back from the gym franchise just to focus on this. So I've been studying this stuff deeply and carefully, and I found some patterns, and they really often point to those two things. And so let's start with the algorithms. We've talked about the business models. We've talked about the underlying mechanisms a little bit. I want to describe, it's one thing to talk about a problem. I think it's another to measure the problem. And there's a big measurement that is available here that it's hard for me not to get emotional when I talk about it. So we'll see how I go. There's a lot of stuff in the news that we see about anxiety and depression in kids. There's all kinds of headlines around this is the worst stuff that's ever been seen. And there's just these gigantic problems with more kids have anxiety and more kids have depression and more kids are on meds and more kids are just feeling terrible and not having a good time in life and not being set up for success. But the thing is that those things are hard to measure. What is actually a useful measure where there's good data is death. And the World Health Organization operates an open database on their website. If you look up the WHO mortality database, you can go on their website and you can query the database and you can ask it for information. And so I asked it for some information. I said, okay, I want to show me the trends over time. Because I always like to look at, like, if a situation is changing, does it change over time? Or does it just seem worse? Or is it actually worse than it used to be? So I said, okay, give me the trends in causes of death over time from the beginning of the data collection, which was in 1951, up until 2019, so that it was specifically before COVID, because COVID, added a whole bunch of variables. And what I found was very shocking. For people under the age of 25, and primarily 10 to 24, the WHO breaks them into 5-year groups, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, 20 to 24. They all started off in the 50s with a very low rate of self-inflicted death. That's how they call it, self-inflicted death. And by the way, I have this on my website. There's charts that show all this stuff I'm about to talk about. The article is called Digital Danger Zone on FamilyITGuy.com.
We're displaying that now for those people that are listening.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
FamilyITGuy.com. Go ahead.
If you scroll down a little bit, there's a search box right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Click into that search box, and then there should be Digital Danger Zone pops up in the results.
Understanding the real risks.
Yeah. So click on that.
Okay. We're clicking on that.
And then if you scroll down, there's some charts, and we can have those charts up on the screen while we talk about this. I think that'd be useful. Should be right about there. Yeah. Okay. So the left side of the chart is 1951 and the right side is 2019. And you'll notice that there's a bunch of lines there. Each line indicates an age group. I had it query all the way up into the 30s. There's 3 of those lines that go up and to the right with a very sharp increase right around 2007. And those 3 lines are 10 to 14, 15 to 19, and 20 to 24. And long story short, the suicide rate in children, including 10 to 14-year-old children, tripled between 2007 and 2019. And you'll see on that chart there, I've plotted the icons of the social media companies that released products during that time period. And you can see little bumps in the chart after each major release of Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. And what this tells me is that there is a strong correlation between a tripling of suicides pre-COVID in children. It correlates with putting social media in their pockets and their backpacks and their bedrooms. Now, before I found this data, I've given lectures to parents where I talk about, you should have moderation in your usage of social media, or your kids' usage of social media. And you should use the Instagram parental controls if you're going to let your kid have Instagram. Well, I can tell you that I've learned since then, in addition to this data, that there is no moderation to be had when it comes to the simple fact that addictive algorithms that are designed by the world's best addiction experts, that are primarily effective and targeted at adults, are way more effective on kids. And that if you expose a child to an addictive algorithm, it can have severe negative consequences for their mental health. And so the first problem is addictive algorithms that correlates with severe mental health consequences, that correlates with a tripling in suicide, to the effect, by the way, that about approximately 1 out of 5 deaths for children are self-inflicted, which I don't even know how to internalize that. It's so severe. But that apparently is the case. Also to the effect that the WHO and the CDC both have data that says that suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people under the age of 25. The first leading cause of death is automotive accidents. The second one is suicide. And the third one is homicide, actually for boys and girls both. All three are the same for boys and girls. And, so when I think about my role as a father, I think about, one of my jobs is I'm the head of security for my family. And as the head of security, I need to know which risks exist so that I can think about how to address them. So the number one risk is automotive accidents. That means that I need to allocate as much budget as I can, and this is going to be different for everybody, and a lot of folks are struggling financially, but as much budget as I can to good tires and good brakes. Mm-hmm. And I need to focus on defensive driving and leaving enough space so that I can drive safely, so that I can show my kids how to drive safely, so that when they get in the car when they're 16 or 18 or 14, depending on where they live and what they do, that they will have at least some knowledge on how to conduct themselves safely. And then the second risk is suicide. And a lot of those suicides seem to correlate to addictive algorithms. And so therefore I need to help them build the skills, and I need to model behaviors that show them how to navigate addictive algorithms. And then the third one is homicide, which, this group is probably keen on firearm safety, being around weapons, how to handle weapons safely. Mm-hmm. So that's problem number one. And I'll pause there for a moment before I go into problem number two.
Well, I'm absorbing. I mentioned to you, I think it was you that I was talking to, that I'm hesitant when I don't have a relationship with a guest to delve too deeply into discussion beforehand, because I don't want to have it out privately the things that we should have out publicly for everybody else to absorb. But in this case, I find myself doing a lot of thinking, a lot of absorption. So I don't really have anything to add at the moment. I guess I will admit to you freely. Um, I think that most of the people that I know that travel in my circles, socially, whatever else, are doing a pretty good job of making sure their kids know how to drive. I live in a rural area, and most of my friends live in rural areas, either small towns or outside of town. And so it's not uncommon, Ben, I mean, my daughter was driving cars when she was 12. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. For sure.
I mean, it's not that wasn't great, but she was. I can remember going someplace on a country road one time to a friend's house, and we had line of sight. There was nobody coming. It was a long sweep down this hill through a valley back up, and I remember getting out and telling my daughter, "Get out." She's like, "What's the matter?" And I said, "You're going to be in the driver's seat." And she's like, I can't do that. I'm like, well, the only way that we're going to get there today is if you get us there, because I'm not going to do it. And so I said, if you think that I'm not prepared to lean this passenger seat back and take a nap and wake up tomorrow morning and get us all to church, you're crazy, because I'll do it. So she got behind the wheel and we inched. Dude, it took us forever to make it 3/4 of a mile. It was a long time, but she did well. She got her confidence under or whatever else. And she had driven our side by side for 100 miles before then, from the age of 8 to 12. So it wasn't a stretch.
Oh yeah.
But so I'm looking at this thing and thinking to myself, does she have driving well in hand? I don't know if that's safe to say, but I feel pretty darn comfortable with most of her driving decisions. I've been with her for a lot of miles. Am I confident about some of these things that I'm seeing in this graph? I'm finding a moment for pause here. I really am. And I'm really bothered by that Snapchat symbol I see there, because I thought to myself, okay, there's an inherent problem with Snapchat. It's the only one that my daughter has. I'm thinking there's an inherent problem with Snapchat, because this was my argument to her. I have a fundamental problem with it because of the lack of accountability. If you can write something, say something, do something, take a picture of something that immediately or almost immediately expires, what you're really saying is there are no consequences linked or bound to the decision I make. That is the antithesis of a well-chosen and a well-lived life. I don't like this platform on sheer premise. And so what I did with her, which is interesting, we're going through it right now. I'll be able to tell you in a week from now what it looks like. But I told her, I said, if you're going to have Snapchat, my expectation from you is this. I want you to go out and I want you to prepare me an essay on the dangers of social media with a special emphasis on Snapchat. And I said, and I want you to prepare that and give me that. I want you to cite your sources. I'll check every one of them. And I'll read all those things. And I said, and oh, by the way, if it doesn't make my satisfaction, 2 things are happening. Number 1, Snapchat's getting turned off. Number 2, you're going to do the essay again. So I said, you have an incentive here, if you want to keep it, to be well researched and well founded, because if I don't like it, I'm going to give you an F and you're done. So I don't know how it's going to go, Ben, but we're going to find out. And that doesn't mean she can keep it. I'm guessing she may not. I don't know. But
yeah. Well, I think that's great. I mean, I think there's a lot there, and it's worth. It's just worth mentioning that there's no perfect answer here, and that there, it's like we said at the beginning, it's just very difficult to navigate. And when she does her essay, Snapchat has a safety center website where, to their credit, because they do a lot of things wrong, but one of the things they've done right is they've actually published a report from their internal findings on the volume of sextortion cases that occur in Snapchat. And they admit also that the number is probably low, because they're only basing their reports off of what it gets reported.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that Snapchat makes it seem like they delete the stuff, the photos and the text messages, but they do not. And we know that because the police have and can subpoena that information and retrieve it from Snapchat. And so that data, because Snapchat is an advertising company too.
Hmm.
and they're not interested in deleting their valuable data, and so they keep it. They just don't let you see it.
Right. Right.
So it could be a lot of good things for her to find there of what's really under the covers, and what kind of company is Snapchat, and what risks exist in concert with the fun that can be had.
All right. Well, moving forward, go ahead. So this is our.
Okay, so that's problem number one: addictive algorithms and mental health. Problem number two is online chat. Online chat is where predators hunt for kids, and they don't go to the park in the white van anymore because that's risky and that's not smart for them, because everybody's got a camera, photo and video, and they're going to have their license plate recorded, and they're going to get arrested if they do that. The chances are high. And so what they do instead is they connect to a VPN, and then they get on Instagram, and they get on Roblox, and they get on any platform that has a chat function. All the icons that you see on that list there included. And then they go and they pretend that they're a kid, and they befriend kids and establish relationships with kids, and then eventually convince some of them that they're in a romantic relationship. It could be a 45-year-old man that is saying that he's a 13-year-old girl. And he might even get some images off the internet of a 13-year-old girl that actually does live near the kid that he's talking to, and so that he can show pictures and things and pretend to be that girl. And there's two types. There's your sexual predator, that is your creep that enjoys hurting kids, and then your criminal network that monetizes the exploitation of kids via blackmailing them into sending things like iTunes gift cards. And so there's all the big criminal networks around the world have pivoted part of their operations towards the exploitation of children because it's very profitable.
Mhm.
And so if you connect your kid to an online chat system, every police officer and psychologist that I've spoken with, including those that work with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, will tell you that 100% of those children will be targeted by one or another type of predator, and most often more than once. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be victimized, but they will be targeted. They will be looked at and assessed as to whether or not they're worthwhile of becoming a good victim. And the numbers are very large. We have the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children as a group that's funded by the U.S. Congress, and they work with a lot of the states' attorneys general and these Internet Crimes Against Children task forces and the FBI and the DHS, and they have a tip line that's called 1-800-THE-LOST. And so if your kids are exploited, or if you're a kid listening to this and you're exploited, you can call 1-800-THE-LOST, and they'll help you connect with the FBI, and then they'll also help you get your photos taken down if your photos get shared on any of the major social media platforms. And so their data indicates, like I said, I like to look at changes over time. So in 2023, they had, and I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, something like 140 something thousand reports of adults sexually exploiting children online specifically. And in 2024, that number was in the I think it was 546,000, something in that range, the mid 500,000 range. 100,000 of those reports were using AI generated images where the kid didn't even have to be tricked into sending a naked image of themselves. The predator generated an image, sent it to the kid, and said, I'm going to share this photo with everybody you know and tell them that it's you unless you pay me or meet me or do what I want. And in 2025, we finished out the year at right about 1 million. And so it's deeply unfortunate that in a place where you can make friends, you can play games, you can share hobbies, you can craft true relationships in these online chat systems, they are full of predators. And it's, there was a research report a couple of years ago from a group that, for example, was looking at Roblox, and they called it a pedophile hellscape. And this is a game that has 112 million daily users, 40 million of which are under the age of 13. And so the two things you want to assess closely and avoid if you can are addictive algorithms and online chat. And those two things cover off a huge swath of the problem set, and I think are the two that are worth the most focus.
Wow. I'm thinking back to the time, it's been a number of years ago, my wife was using Pinterest from time to time. And I don't remember if my daughter had a phone yet then or not, but my wife would let her use it. And I was thinking, well, what trouble can she possibly get into looking up chocolate chip cookie recipes? She's cooking a lot. Life is all good. And then we found out that I didn't know this. I had no idea, but there's a messaging system through Pinterest, or there was at the time, or some whatever. I didn't know that. I didn't have Pinterest. I didn't care. I just like chocolate chip cookies, right? So it's all good. So I found out that there is a messaging component, and that my daughter had been messaging back and forth with boys her age from other places. Like there was a kid from Florida, supposedly, and a kid from somewhere else. And I read them, and it was just, hey, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. So there was the beginning of this conversation. And I told her, I said, I realize that it's normal when people ping you, say, hey, hello, this is who I am, for you to be polite enough to gesture or wave back, digitally or otherwise. But I said, that's really not what we want to do here. I said, sweetheart, do you have any idea if these people are even real? And I said, and they can be very convincing. And so I said, this isn't what you want to do. And here are the problems associated with that. And thank goodness she hadn't said anything other than hello, whatever else. And I think back on that now as if, what 14-year-old boy is on Pinterest looking at chocolate chip cookie recipes? You know what I mean? So I found that a little unlikely, so I don't know what those people were or weren't, but I can't imagine probably that was going to go well. And it was from an app that I'd assume was benign or innocuous. And then I realized pretty quick, I've got to pay strict attention to what's going on. I even talked to my wife. I'm like, this was on your phone, on your app that your kid was using. So did you know? She's like, I had no idea. I'm going to go through and I'm going to check all these things now because it wasn't something I brought to bear. But now we did,
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, that's the thing. Like these problems are so big that they bring a lot of opportunity for great conversations and great education. Just exactly what you did is spot on. Hey, listen, here's what goes on in these things. Here's what you should be thinking of. Like basically just don't take it for granted that anything on the internet is as it is presented, or that any person is as they are presented. And if somebody is complimenting you or telling you all these wonderful things or commenting on your appearance or any of these things that are out of scope for the environment you're in, if the conversation is not about the chocolate chips, that's a red flag. If you're in a game and the conversation is not about Call of Duty or Minecraft and how to win the game, and it's personal, that's a red flag. And so there's a lot of good education that can be had there.
Even then, yes, red flag, 100%. Even then, I wouldn't give it the green flag if it didn't contain red flag specifically. And the reason why I say it is, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we interviewed a gentleman by the name of Ross Hick, and he works with predators. I don't know if it's necessarily interrogations, you'd say, and or rehabilitation, but it's all those things. And he was describing what it's like for some predators and the long con. I mean, some of these people worked to get in a position of authority or hierarchy, however you want to describe it. over the course of a year or a year and a half to finally spring the trap, and very elaborate, whatever else. And I think very elaborate plans rather, but I think that one of the reasons that they were doing it in the digital sphere quite so much is because it was easy for them to keep so many of these cons going at once. Whereas if they had to actually, do these things at a park or in the physical realm, it would be very hard to capitalize on those things quickly. So I'm not saying that you're safe to be arm's length from somebody versus the digital realm, but it looks to me like it's exponentially easier to do a lot of damage all at once in the digital sphere.
It is, and a lot of it's automated. A lot of the initial hunting is automated. It's treated the same way you would run a sales team. When you run a sales team in a business, you have what are called hunters and farmers. The hunters are the ones doing the cold calling and going out and just seeing who will talk and who they can get as leads. And then once they get a lead, they qualify the lead. They find out, is this a person we should go chase after? And then if the answer is yes, then they pass them to the farmers. And then the farmers establish a relationship and then maintain the relationship in the hope to have a sale or maximize a sale. And it's the same thing here. They use AI and bots to do the hunting and go and find their, it sounds cold to say, but I'll just use the analogy, to find their leads. And then who's a warm lead? Is there a kid that's feeling bad about themselves or that's demonstrating that they're vulnerable? And then if they are, then they pass them to the relationship managers who actually go and establish a relationship. And then, the long-term thing is a thing. So I actually just released a podcast on Sunday with Shauna Hoffman, the CEO of the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Her son, and she came from she worked in AI for a decade. She was an executive in an AI field, and is very aware and savvy of technology, and as is her son. And her son was caught in a 2-year con by a lady on the internet that he thought he had a real relationship with, and he thought they were going to get married. And come to find out, she was a 67-year-old con artist who was doing this to a bunch of guys. And she had gotten him, over the course of 2 years, eventually started asking for money and got $10,000 out of him over time. And then when he found out that she wasn't real, he was suicidal. He stopped going to school. It actually broke him mentally to the effect that when he was with his mom in person, he said, "I don't know if you're real." Like this stuff, for me, it's very impactful to think about it and hear about these stories, because I feel like it's unfortunately too easy to think that it's not that big of a deal if somebody lies to you about them being your girlfriend on the internet. But I hear time and time again the stories of severe trauma that comes out of these things that develop into massive trust issues and confidence issues and the ability to conduct life in a healthy way. And stuff is very, very impactful and very sad. And it's avoidable. And that's why I appreciate the conversation today, because, I recognize that as humans, we don't make decisions based on information. We make decisions based on emotion. And so I'm sharing information here, and I'm sharing a bit of my emotion as well, in the hopes that hopefully it can help at least one person.
Well, what should we be? Okay, so there's a lot of things going through my mind. I remember. Okay, so as it pertains to youth or anybody underage, non-adults, you're offering on your site, this familyitguy.com, methods of protection, best practices, how to learn about these things, think pieces and data that you have put forward for consideration and recommendation. What happens when we become adults? And I ask this specifically because I've got friends whose children are now of age. They're 18 and above, and they're either dating or they're online dating or whatever else. And now they're scared that they might get wrangled in that venue. So Are there best practices as adults that we should be looking at that move beyond some of the things that are on the Family IT Guy site?
Yeah, I think a lot of them mirror the same practices that you might have your kids do, avoiding algorithms for yourself, because these things, the same mental health outcomes occur for adults. They're just less severe. Like on that same chart, you could see that the older ages didn't spike up and to the right as much. They increased, but like, yeah, so those three lines there, those are the young ages. Then if you go to that one there, if you look closely at the 25 to 29, 30 to 34, those lines, and it's hard to tell, because it's kind of small, but there's an increase there. It just didn't severely go way up to the right in such a short period of time like it did for the young people because of the development of the frontal lobe that occurs on average at age 25. But I think avoiding, basically looking and say, okay, who's in charge here? Am I in charge of my technology, or is my technology in charge of me? I think that is a very good framing to have in mind, and to think about those screen time numbers, and to think about the trade of time and attention. Now those are very big picture conceptual things, right? And now if we want to talk about actual tactics outside of like what to avoid, well, what do you do? I think practice not having your phone in the bedroom at night, sleeping, having it charge in the kitchen or the living room or something is a good one. I think that running filters on your network connections is important. And this is where it gets difficult because there's some technical things here. But I have an article on my website about DNS filters. And that's something that's something that usually just the IT people are talking about. But yeah, if you click on that and type in DNS.
Oops.
So the family DNS filter. So this describes what it is and how to go about using a DNS filter. There's a program called NextDNS, NEXT-DNS. It's the first thing I install on all my devices. It filters. You have your choice of filters. You can filter privacy things like trackers. You can filter out the social media companies which operate the tracking systems. You can filter ads, you can filter porn, you can filter all kinds of stuff. And it's very effective. I run it on all my stuff. I run it on my home router. I run it on my computer. I run it on my phone. I even run it on my Apple TV. And what's nice about running it on the router is that like all the TVs they're all spy devices now. You can block all that stuff. You can block your robot vacuum from from spying on you. You can block your laundry machine, from spying on you, all this kind of stuff. And so NextDNS is a really good one that I like, that I recommend trying out. And and then if anything, you can email them for help if you get stuck. That's a good one. To throw out a couple, especially for the adults, like what can we do for ourselves? I use a privacy-focused search engine. I don't use Google. I use one called Kagi, Kagi. I use Kagi's search engine, and I even use their web browser. They make their own web browser that's called Orion. And I pay for search. I can't remember how much I pay them. I like to support the companies that are doing good work. So I think I'm on their higher tier. It's like $20 a month or something. And then I use Signal. It's a communications app for texting and for phone calls, and it even does video calls. And it's actually, oddly enough, it's free, but it's not one of those where like it's legitimately free. It's not spying on you in the background. And Signal's fantastic. I recommend Signal for sure. That's something that it's oddly kind of hard to get people to switch the program that they use for text messaging, and for phone calls. But all my family and friends, over the years, I've gotten them all to switch, and so we're all on Signal. And what that means is that Nobody sees what we say except for us.
Yeah.
Signal can't see it. It cannot be subpoenaed. You have to, in order to see what I say in my Signal chat, you would have to steal my phone while it's unlocked and then open Signal and then force me to do Face ID to look at my Signal chat.
Yeah.
And there's no other way to look at it. And then the other one I like is I like paying for email. And specifically, I recommend Proton Mail. There's a company called Proton. They're based out of Switzerland. And they make a Google competitor. So they do a email program. They do a file storage program that's kind of like Google Drive. They call it Proton Drive. And they have a family plan where you can create email addresses for your family. And if you email and share files within your family, if it stays within the Proton system, it's truly secure, just like Signal. Nobody else can see your messages. Nobody else can see your files. Proton themselves cannot see your stuff, to the effect that if you lose your password, you lose all your stuff. Like it's truly secure.
Yeah.
I even for folks that don't have Signal, I'll use FaceTime for phone calls because FaceTime is a lot harder to spy on than a normal phone call. So those are a few examples.
Well, I have a Proton Mail account and I haven't done much with it. I set it up years ago, and I think that that's actually what they're doing, from what I can tell, is much better today than when I very first hopped on board. But I think I've been using Signal for, I don't know, 3 years now. My wife, daughter, myself, when my dad was alive, it's the only thing that we use. I mean, it's in our family. I haven't had any success getting very many other people, a few friends at church, but most of the time they're just using standard messaging, whatever else. But the only way that we communicate is our internal family here, through Signal. That's all we use.
Excellent. That's great. And the thing is, like, you can't, if you're going to touch the internet, it's hard to be like, there's no such thing as like total privacy. But I think with some of these tools, you can chip away and you can feed the machine less. Maybe it's not feasible to not feed it at all. But I think there's a lot of gray area there. You can feed it less. And so that's a good move.
Okay. Well, so my thinking has been, and you need to correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my thinking has been, when it comes to things like social media, and when I say that, I'm talking about the things, let's call it Facebook as a baseline. When I think of social media, I think of something where people are almost living vicariously through their cyber selves. Not all, but most people I know are putting the best version of themselves out there. The best pictures, the best thought, whatever else that they write down. Then there's others who they'll say anything or they'll offend anybody. And some of them do this with enthusiasm, or there's folks that will just like to argue for the sake of arguing, or opposition, or whatever else. I don't know. But it seems like Facebook allows for all those things that seem like they come through. Then you've got X, formerly Twitter, and it looks like, I used to refer to it as the sewer, because basically it's, I know you are, but what am I? Like two little 8-year-olds arguing back and forth, then you are relegated to a very little bit of space in order to quip this is what I think, and the heck with y'all if you don't, that kind of thing. Then you've got Instagram that appears to be the pictorial version of Twitter being the sewer, X being the sewer. And then you've got other things that have gone from there. Apparently Snapchat is, I'm not accountable, so I could do what I want, and then it'll go away in a little bit. And then things like TikTok, where I'm going to put it all out there. I'm going to sensationalize these things. And, oh, by the way, in the meantime, I'm handing it all over to China while I'm doing it. So I look at this thing, and I'm seeing each one of these seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. And they're worse for you. They're worse for your brain. And the whole time I'm looking at friends or the children of friends that I can see. And it appears as if what they're doing on the social media platforms that they're part of is they're appealing to others. I want to do something here that shows you wanting me. Basically, I want to see your likes and your reactions and your comments. And then you can watch some of these people that aren't very healthy in what they do, and maybe others are recognizing that their health is degrading, and they get less and less and less response, which in a couple of the cases that I can think of have 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 caused or have been part of watching these kids post more audacious things and more negative and dark things. And it's like I can watch this person's psyche devolve, and it breaks my heart, man. And so when I see these things, I'm asking myself, should we, any of us, be any part of this? Number one. And oh, by the way, if we are, we need to be very structured on the front end on what we're going to do. You can't talk to a successful day trader or any successful financial person without them telling you that they set up a stop loss. I mean, they put it in place on the front end in their health. In the beginning, they're like, this is the maximum amount of money that I'm willing to lose on this venture. I don't care if it's on day 1 or day 700. When I hit 10 points or 8 or 13 or whatever, I'm out. It doesn't matter what's going on. I'm going to set my stop loss. We don't seem like we do that with things as important as ourselves or our psyche when we enter social media. We should say, listen, these are hard stop items. This is, like you're saying, this is a zone of my home. We're not going to play monkey shines with phones. This is an area in my home, or this is a threshold in terms of time I'm not willing to move beyond. We should also do that, I would say, with the content. These are red flags, like you mentioned. When I see this, I'm out. Or when I notice this about myself, I'm leaving. I question whether we do those things, Ben.
You know, generally we don't. And I think it's because these systems make us feel like we're part of a tribe. They make us feel, I mean, they're called social media. They make us feel like it's social.
Yeah.
These addiction experts have tapped into that part of our psyche where we feel like we're going to be missing out on something important if we don't go and attach our eyeballs. And what's fascinating is that when you detach, whether you do it for a day or a week or a month or a year, you find out that you're not missing anything and that you just feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very literally tricky situation that humanity is just barely starting to grapple with. And I think that with the scope of these problems, these gigantic, disgusting problems that I you know, like I say, I hate to even speak of them, but here they are. It gives us the opportunity to have positive change and say, well, if this problem is screaming in my face and my gut, let me try to pay attention to that and see what can I do and what kind of positive change can I make for myself and therefore for my kids and therefore for the future, you know, and their kids and so on. And so I think there actually is a lot of positivity hidden in the shadows here of where at the end of the day, all of the stuff we've discussed is consensual. Nobody's forcing us to use any of these systems. Now, sometimes you have things where you can't pay your bills without using the internet. You can't do this and that. You can't get a job. You know, there's gray area, but you don't have to use the systems that we've talked about. Like nobody is saying like, hey, no, here, look at that. You know, so there's a lot of positivity here, I think, that in the opportunities that are in front of us.
Well, I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. I'm glad that this ridiculous, horrible algorithm, or I would refer to it that way. I'm sure it has things that it does it does well, but I'm glad that you popped up in front of me. I'm glad that I stopped to listen. I'm glad that when I zip down through that I stop and I listen to some of these things that you're saying, because they've been very, very helpful for me, number one, and they've also given me reason to pause, and also. And I hope that you know this, and I say this with sincerity. Some of the things that you've said have also been very helpful in terms of my internal strength, because there are times, and this isn't a swipe at my friends, some of whom will be listening to this and like, he's talking about me. Well, maybe I am if you feel that way, but and I still love you no matter what.
Right.
But it's given me the strength to push back, because there is a lot of people in my social circles that are like, I don't understand what your problem is. I love TikTok. I spend 2 hours on there a day, and it's fantastic. I laugh, I joke, I cry. I mean, it's the best. And I'm like, well, it looks pretty horrible to me, you know, just from, and
Yeah.
so, and I'm not going to do that. And oh, by the way, there are no circumstances under which I'll allow my kids to do TikTok. I said, now when they're adults and they have the intellect and whatever else to make these decisions, I hope that I've trained them up in ways that will make them approach this with discernment. But and I'll have to hope that things go well and pray, right? But right now, while
Yeah.
these children are in my care, the answer to some of these things is unequivocally no. And if you don't like it, that's okay. But I won't be pushed off that idea. So watching some of these things that I've seen from you have helped shore me up, because there have been times when I've wanted to back down, Ben. I'll admit it to you freely. I'll admit it to
Oh,
everybody listening.
oh, of course.
I've
Yes.
wanted to I've
Yes.
wanted to say, yeah, baby, life would be easier if I let you do these things, and I don't like that you're ostracized or put on an island because you don't have them. I This is, and I don't
Yeah.
want to make this about her because it happens to lots of kids, and I've heard this. But there was a friend of mine who's well, it was a girl, and I don't remember what it was. I don't remember if it was volleyball or soccer or something like that. Their coach did all their organizing and all their networking, all their discussions through one of these horrible apps. That's no joke.
Yes.
They weren't using
Yes.
Team Reach, or they weren't using basic organizing things that a lot of people use. They're like, oh, we'll do all our organizing through Snapchat, or we're going to do it all through the message service on this app. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What if your kid doesn't have that? And they're like, well, that was the thing. We installed it on my
Yeah.
kid's device so she could go do it. I'm like, no, no, no. Tell the coach to
Yeah.
come up with something better, something safe. You should have pushed back on that. So those things are out there. They happen. It's so common to use this junk, Ben, that I think that people opt in and they're like, well, I couldn't say no. Well, yeah, you can. Yeah, you
It's
can.
awfully hard, man. It's real hard. It takes an enormous amount of strength to push back against social norms. Something I like to tell people is, and especially my family, is I'm not here to be normal. Normal is the middle of the bell curve. Normal
Mhm.
is average. I'm here to be on the right side of the bell curve. I'm here to be exceptional. And normal means doing what everybody else does. And I don't give a damn. Now, do I feel social pressures the same way you do? Absolutely, man.
Mhm.
And these things are speaking of normal, that's normal. But it's like, oh, well, so and so has this and that. Well, I mean, so and so, they might be normal, but we're not.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, definitely stay strong. I back it. It's super difficult, but it's the boundaries that get drawn are just so valuable and so challenging.
Yeah. All right. So let me share the screen for the last time here. We've got, oops, let me add that back to the stage. So familyitguy.com, and there are a number of places. I'll scroll down here real quick. I assume. Okay, so it's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, X, all the basic places that we just complained about.
Yes.
You can find
That's right.
Ben.
I am where everybody else is, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
well, dude, I've got a good friend, my buddy Dave Halbrook, always says, hey, buddy, you got to hunt where the ducks are. Like, okay, yes, you're right. So I can
Yes.
appreciate that you're there, but I hope that you're not, or you're adding to the repair rather than the damage. So thank you for that. FamilyITguy.com. You can get some protection there. You can get some context. And there are services and things that Ben actually offers for you if you want to take him up on them. And I highly encourage you people to seriously consider this. I'm learning more about it all the time. And it's obvious to me, Ben, that you may find yourself in a position where you said, I wish I had known that earlier, and bad things could befall you or befall others. So get ahead of this and learn what's going on there, because these things are moving at such a fast rate. It's very hard to keep up without the help. It really is. It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
Okay. Any last words before we go?
It's never too late for positive change. 2026 is, I feel really good about the way the year's starting off, and I think we've got a lot of positivity in front of us, and super happy and grateful for the opportunity to speak to everybody today.
Ben, thank you. Everybody go to the familyitguy.com. Always be sure to check out iowafc.org. Use our trusted partners. If you've got an IFC membership, they offer you goods and services, tangible items, discounts. Check out the store. Pick up your shirt at Brownells, 9-line apparel with all the good stuff. So we're trying to keep things quality here in our podcast and quality in our store. Thank you very much, Ben, and everybody out there. Have a great day.